So now we're done with section 4 of chapter 3. We're going to discuss popular sovereignty, examine checks and balances, and analyze federalism. During the making of the constitutions, delegates disagreed about a number of things, but they agreed on the fact they wanted to make a government that represented the people. So they wanted people to have a say in things. The framers embraced popular sovereignty, the rule of law, separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism, which are going to be the things we talk about in this section. It was important to the framers to establish a representative democracy where the people were represented. The idea of popular sovereignty is the power lies with the people. Now, you say, well, I thought it was democracy. It was a government where power lies with the people. It is. Popular sovereignty, though, is where they allow the people to determine things. The importance includes several provisions to ensure the sovereignty of the people, such as the ability to vote. Elected officials are always accountable to the people. Now, popular sovereignty is going to get the most important and the most notice when it's dealing with stuff like slavery. With the expansion of slavery, popular sovereignty is going to become a big role out west. As states like Missouri and Kansas are added in, it's left up to the people to determine if they want to be a free state or a slave state. Another issue of popular sovereignty, which is where people get to vote on what they want for their own state, is stuff like the legalization of marijuana. There's a lot of states where the state approved to allow it, and other states where they didn't. The importance includes several provisions, whenever that, but the idea is to let the people have a say. The rule of law is the framers believe the government should be strong, but not too strong. To limit the role of government, the Constitution lays out what can and can't be done. And this is the rule of law. The law applies to everybody. It doesn't matter if you are the president. It doesn't matter if you are a senator. It doesn't matter if you're a movie star. It doesn't matter who you are. The law applies to everyone. Now, does the rule of law always work? No. Because if I sue, I've just thought of a number of dated references such as Paris Hilton and Lionel Richie for some reason. I don't know why I would sue Lionel Richie. But either way, if I went and sued somebody, look, I'll use Nick Saban as an example. Say I sued Nick Saban for something. Do you think that the lawyer I can afford and the lawyer that Nick Saban can afford are going to be on the same level? No, not at all. So even though I might be right, his lawyer may get him better in the case, and he may wind up winning because of it. That's the idea. The rule of law is the law applies to everybody. Now, once it gets to the court system, it doesn't always work out that way, or even the law enforcement part of it. It's not always, people aren't always treated equal. Sometimes you have where people are shown favoritism based on who they are, or something like that. So that's the idea. Separation of powers. The framers divided the government up into 3 branches to keep them all limited on their power. French philosopher Baron de Montesquieu believed the best way to separate powers was to do this, to establish limitations on them. The separation of powers is the split of authority between the 3 branches of government. That's the idea, is that you split authority between the 3 branches of government so that they all have equal power, and they're separate. Congress makes laws. That's what they get to do. They get to impeach the president or remove him from office. The executive branch gets to enforce the law, and they get to deal with dignitaries of other countries and things like that. The Supreme Court interprets the law, and they get to kind of make the social standards of what becomes norm in society. So they all have their own power and their own ability, but it's separate from each other so that they all don't have too much power. And that's where checks and balances comes in. To keep one branch from getting too powerful, they included a system of checks and balances, where each branch can check and restrain the power of the others. So, for example, again, Congress can impeach the president and remove him from office if they feel he's went against his constitutional rights or his constitutional duty. In the same way, the president can veto laws that Congress is trying to pass if he feels like that Congress is overstepping their bounds by creating a law that way. And in the same way, the president also gets to appoint Supreme Court justices So who's going to serve on the Supreme Court? They get to decide who gets to go on there. But it has to go through a congressional hearing where Congress has to approve. The president can say, hey, I'm going to get, and again, with all the dated references, I want to say Flavor Flav. I don't know where all these old references are coming from. But let's just say that, he wants to make Tom Brady, since they won the Super Bowl last night, he wants to make Tom Brady a Supreme Court justice. Now, Tom Brady will be a terrible Supreme Court justice. He has no experience with courts at all. So if the president can just appoint somebody, that would be a disaster. But the fact that they have to go through a hearing is very important. An example is the president can veto laws proposed by Congress and name federal judges. Congress can block presidential appointments and treaties. Congress can reject judicial appointments and remove judges through impeachment, and the Supreme Court can overturn laws and executive policies that goes against the Constitution. Those are just a few examples of how checks and balances work. And federalism limits government's power by sharing power between the federal and the state governments. An example of this is that Article 1 states that the federal government can make money in treaties with other countries. States can't do that. States can't make treaties with other countries. You can't say, hey, we're in a war with Germany. Missouri is going to make a treaty for us and we're going to end this war. That's not how it works, It has to be the federal government that does this. Express powers are the powers given to the federal government. These are powers that are just given just to the federal government. It's not given to anybody else. Reserved powers are powers that are kept by the states. And this is going to allow them to, for example, like I mentioned earlier, the whole idea of legalizing marijuana. That's a reserved power given to the states. And in some areas, the state and federal government's power can overlap, and this works concurrent powers, where they both have can share powers in this way. When the state and federal governments have laws that go against each other, it can get strange because the federal government can't go against the Constitution and the state laws can't go against the federal or the Constitution. And of course, like a local municipality like Phil Campbell can't say, you don't have to pay your federal taxes. They can't do that. It's against the law. The principles in the Constitution is the basis on which our government is based. The U.S. Constitution stands as a powerful symbol of American values and a source of unity and pride. So the federal government has certain powers, but they allow the state to have certain powers. The state can't overstep their bounds and do things that goes against the federal government. Just like states can't, or cities can't go against states or the federal government. There's a chain of command. So that brings us to the end of chapter 3, and that's going to bring us into chapter 4. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down the Bill of Rights and what your rights are as an American citizen. So, we discussed popular sovereignty, examine checks and balances, and analyze federalism. So we will pick back up with chapter 4.